When my father passed away, I thought the worst part was over. But a single document hidden in his study flipped my entire world upside down. My cousin, the one I trusted most, had engineered a plan to cut me out entirely. Every family gathering became a stage for Smiles hiding betrayal, and the truth was far darker than I could imagine. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 32, and until last spring, I thought I understood my family. It was a rainy Thursday in late March when the call came. My father had collapsed in his study. By the time I reached his house in Portland, the paramedics were already gone, leaving only a thin, grey sheet over his still form. The scent of old books and his cologne hung heavy in the air. We buried him 3 days later. My mother had been gone for years, so it was just me, my father's younger sister Linda, and her son, my cousin Ryan. Ryan was 2 years younger than me, charming in that born to get away with anything sort of way. We'd grown up together, even shared summers fishing at our grandfather's cabin. After the funeral, we gathered in Dad's study to talk about the next steps. The room was dim except for the desk lamp, casting long shadows over stacks of papers. That's when Aunt Linda said something that didn't sit right. "You know," she began, pouring herself tea, "your father and I have been discussing some changes to the estate." "Changes?" I asked, glancing at Ryan, who avoided my eyes. "Yes," she said smoothly. "He wanted to make sure the property wouldn't be a burden to you. You're young, busy. Ryan has the time to maintain it." The property she meant wasn't just a house. It was a 2-acre estate worth over $1.04 million, complete with a vintage car collection in the garage. My father and I had spent countless weekends restoring those cars together. "That doesn't make sense," I said, my voice tightening. "Dad told me the place would be mine. He wanted me to keep it in the family." Ryan finally spoke, his tone too casual. "Plans change, man. Maybe he realized you didn't need it as much as I do." Something inside me shifted then. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was a prickling awareness that something was off. Later that night, at 2:47 a.m, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, the rain hammering the roof, replaying the conversation in my head. My father never would have made that decision without telling me. That's when I decided to drive back to his house alone. I still had a key. In the study, the air was stale, and the desk drawers were locked. But in the cabinet behind the desk, under a false bottom, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. My hand shook as I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and one sentence that made my knees buckle. The paper was my father's handwritten will, dated just 2 months before his death. "I leave my entire estate, including the house, vehicles, and accounts to my son, Ethan Walker, without condition." I read it 3 times, my pulse hammering in my ears. There was no mention of Ryan, no mention of Aunt Linda. Just me. The next morning, I went to my father's lawyer, Mr. Klein, a wiry man with sharp glasses who'd handled our family affairs for years. His brow furrowed as he scanned the document. "This is strange," he murmured. "The will on file he names you as the sole heir, but the copy filed last week with the county clerk is different." "Different how?" I asked. "In that version," he said slowly, "the estate is split 50-50 between you and Ryan." The air in his office felt heavier. My father's signature was on both documents, same pen stroke, same flourish, but the dates didn't match. The newer one was filed after my father had already passed. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying," Klein interrupted, lowering his voice, "someone filed a forged will." The words hit me like a fist. That evening, I decided to confront Ryan. He was in the garage at Aunt Linda's place, polishing his motorcycle like nothing in the world was wrong. "You forged Dad's will," I said flatly. He smirked without looking up. "Careful with accusations like that. You don't have proof." "I have more than you think." Finally, he met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw the mask drop. His voice was low, almost bored. "Ethan, you think Dad loved you more than me? That he deserved everything? He told me things about you, things that would make you wish you'd never seen that paper." "What the hell are you talking about?" He just wiped his hands on a rag and walked away. For the next 2 weeks, the tension in the family was unbearable. Aunt Linda started hinting to distant relatives that I was unstable from grief. Mr. Klein filed a challenge to the new will, but the legal process crawled forward at a snail's pace. Then, one night, as I was going through old photo albums in my father's attic, I found something wedged between the pages, a yellowed letter, dated August 14, 1993, addressed to my father from a woman I'd never heard of. The first line stopped my breath. "I'm sorry I never told Ethan the truth about who his real father is." I sat frozen on the attic floor, the letter trembling in my hands. The paper smelled faintly of old perfume, like it had been sealed away for decades. The letter was from someone named Caroline Mason. She wrote about a brief relationship with my mother before she met the man I'd always known as my father. Caroline claimed the man who raised me knew the truth and loved me anyway. The words twisted in my chest like a knife. "Please, for Ethan's sake, keep this between us. He doesn't need to grow up knowing the man he calls father is not his by blood." My pulse thudded in my ears. It was nearly 3:00 a.m, and I could hear the rain against the attic window. Suddenly, the comments Ryan had made started to make sense. Things about you, things that would make you wish you'd never seen that paper. But why would he know? The next morning, I took the letter to Mr. Klein. His face turned pale. This complicates things, he said, removing his glasses. If Ryan or your aunt got hold of this, they could use it to question your claim to the estate. Bloodlines can be a nasty weapon in probate court. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. So they knew? Linda's been around long enough to suspect. Ryan, maybe she told him. That night, I went to see Aunt Linda. Her house smelled of coffee and cigarette smoke. She didn't seem surprised to see me. You found a letter, she said, as if reading my mind. My stomach churned. So you knew, this whole time. Linda leaned back in her chair, the corners of her mouth curling. Your father, the man who raised you, loved you enough to keep it secret, but love doesn't change blood, and blood decides inheritance. That's not how it works, I shot back. In court, she said with a thin smile, it might. The next week was a blur of legal paperwork, tense calls from Klein, and whispered gossip from relatives. I kept the letter hidden in my apartment, locked away. Then one evening, I came home to find my apartment door ajar. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. Drawers were open, paper scattered. The small safe where I'd kept the letter was gone. On the kitchen counter sat a note, written in Ryan's handwriting. Now we're even. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in my apartment felt like a threat, every shadow like a reminder that Ryan had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I stormed into Mr. Klein's office. He has the letter. He's going to use it. Klein looked grim. If he produces that letter in court, even if it's not legally binding proof, it will muddy the waters. Judges don't like uncertainty in inheritance cases. It could drag on for years and bleed you dry. I leaned over his desk. Then I need something bigger, something that will take him down before he even tries. Klein hesitated, then said, there's a possibility. Your father kept meticulous financial records. If Ryan or Linda touched the estate before probate, that's illegal, if we can prove it. I spent the next week digging through my father's storage unit. This coded every box, but I worked through them one by one. Receipts, bank statements, tax records, hundreds of pages. On the fourth day, I found it, a series of withdrawals totaling $72,000 from my father's account, all made in the 2 weeks after his death. The transactions were done in person, signature matching Linda's handwriting. That was it. The smoking gun. I took the documents to Klein, and for the first time in weeks, I saw him smile. With this, Ethan, we're not just challenging the will, we're pressing charges. 2 days later, we filed a formal complaint. The police contacted Linda for questioning. She didn't take it well. That evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. When I answered, it was Ryan's voice, low and dangerous. You think you're clever, you're about to regret this. You don't know what Dad told me before he died. My breath caught. What are you talking about? He chuckled, slow and mocking. You think the letter was the whole story, that's just the surface. There's something else, something that will make you wish you'd walked away. Before I could respond, the line went dead. The next morning, a manila envelope was shoved under my apartment door. Inside was a single photograph. It showed my father, 20 years younger, standing with a man I'd never seen before. But it was the caption scrawled on the back that made my hands go cold. Your real father, and he's still alive. Do you want me to continue with part 5 right away? This is where the stakes go from legal battle to full-blown family implosion. I must have stared at that photograph for an hour. The man standing beside my father wasn't just some stranger, he looked like me. Same jawline, same dark eyes, even the same crooked smirk I'd seen in the mirror my whole life. I turned the photo over again. The handwriting was definitely Ryan's, but the way the caption was written, it was like he was daring me to find this man. That night, I called Klein. If this is true, and my biological father is alive, could that affect the case? It could, he admitted. If the other side gets DNA proof, they could argue you're not entitled to your father's estate at all. But Ethan, be careful. If Ryan has this information, it's because he wants to use it, not because he wants you to know the truth. I barely slept. By morning, curiosity had beaten fear. I went to the Portland Public Library, digging through archived newspapers. After hours of squinting at microfilm, I found him Michael Carver, a mechanic who'd owned a shop in Eugene back in the 90s. The article mentioned he'd moved to Seattle around 2002. By the end of the week, I was standing outside a run-down auto shop on the outskirts of Seattle. The air smelled of oil and rust. Inside, a tall man in his late 50s wiped grease off his hands and looked at me with a flicker of recognition. You're Ethan, he said, as if testing the name. I think you're my father, I blurted out. He sighed, leaning against the workbench. I knew this day would come. We talked for 2 hours. Michael admitted he'd been in love with my mother before she met the man who raised me. When she got pregnant, she chose stability over him. My father, the man I grew up with, had agreed to raise me as his own. Michael said he'd stayed away out of respect. I left the shop with more questions than answers. But one thing Michael told me stuck. Your cousin, he came to see me 2 months ago. Asked a lot of questions about you. Said he was working on some family project. I didn't trust him. Back in Portland that night, I found a voicemail from Klein, his voice tight. Ethan, we have a problem. Linda's been arrested for the withdrawals, but Ryan just filed a new claim. He's accusing you of fraud, says you lied about being Dad's son, and he has a DNA test to back it up. I sat in my apartment, the voicemail replaying in my head until the words blurred together. A DNA test. Ryan had actually gone through with it. When I called Klein, his voice was even sharper. He submitted it as evidence this morning. Ethan, it shows a 0% match between you and your father. That's because he wasn't my biological father, I snapped. But that doesn't mean I wasn't his legal son. I know, Klein said, but Ryan's banking on the court seeing this as deception. He's trying to paint you as someone who only took an inheritance that didn't belong to you. The court date was set for the following Thursday. Until then, every conversation with family felt like walking into a minefield. Half of them avoided me. The other half whispered behind my back. 3 days before the hearing, I got a text from Michael, the man I now knew as my biological father. We need to meet. I have something that can help you. We met at a diner just off a -5. Michael slid a battered envelope across the table. Inside were copies of letters between him and my mother from the year I was born. One letter from her stood out. I have spoken with Richard, the man who raised me. He wants to raise Ethan as his own. He understands. He will be the father in every legal sense. We will both sign the agreement. Attached was a notarized document dated 1991 stating exactly that. Richard Walker would be my legal father with full parental rights. This, Michael said, makes Ryan's DNA stunt useless, but there's more. I think Ryan's been planning this for months. He offered me $50,000 if I testify against you. The air in the diner went cold. And you said it? I told him to shove it, Michael said flatly. But I kept the check he gave me as a down payment. You can show this to your lawyer. By the time I got back to Portland, I had a plan. Klein's face lit up when he saw the documents and the check. This changes everything. Not only can we shut down his claim, we can bury him legally. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse ready for a fight. Ryan sat across the aisle, smug as ever, Aunt Linda's seat conspicuously empty. When the judge asked Klein to present our defence, he calmly laid out the notarized agreement, the letters, and finally, the check Ryan had written to Michael. The judge's expression shifted from interest to open disgust. Mr. Carver will testify next, Klein said, and his testimony will make clear that Mr. Ryan Walker engaged in bribery, forgery, and attempted fraud. Ryan's face went pale. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Walker, you may want to speak with your attorney about a plea before we move forward with criminal charges. Ryan's hand twitched like he wanted to say something, but then the courtroom doors opened and a uniformed officer stepped in with the file. He handed it to the judge, who flipped through it, his eyes narrowing. This, the judge said slowly, is about to change the scope of these proceedings entirely. The judge set the file down, his gaze fixed on Ryan. This, he said, tapping the folder, is a record of transactions from the Oregon State Bank. It details transfers from the late Richard Walker's accounts into one registered under your name, Mr. Ryan Walker, totaling over $210,000, all made within days of his death. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I felt my hands clench into fists. Klein didn't even look surprised. He must have suspected something like this all along. Ryan's lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously, but Ryan just stared at the table. The smugness was gone, replaced by the grey, drawn look of a man realizing the walls were closing in. Given this new evidence, the judge continued, the court is moving to freeze Mr. Ryan Walker's assets immediately. Criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement will be filed. Ryan finally spoke, his voice cracking. He wasn't even his real son. I was just taking what should have been him. Enough, the judge snapped. He stole from the estate and attempted to bribe a witness. You will have plenty of time to explain yourself in criminal court. Michael was called to the stand next. He testified clearly and without hesitation, confirming the bribe attempt and the legal agreement naming my father as my rightful legal parent. Klein followed with the forged full evidence and the timeline of the bank withdrawals. By the time the judge banged his gavel, the decision was final. The original will naming me sole heir was reinstated. The estate, the house, the cars, and every cent my father left me were mine. Ryan was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Outside, the spring air felt sharper, cleaner. Michael stood next to me, awkward but solid. Your dad, the one who raised you, he must have been proud, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. I think he'd want me to keep the place, keep it in the family. Michael nodded. Then don't let anyone take that from you again. As we walked toward the courthouse steps, Klein caught up with me, a rare smile on his face. Ethan, you didn't just win the case, you dismantled their entire scheme, and for what it's worth, that's a kind of justice your father would have appreciated. I looked back once, just in time to see Ryan shoved into the back of a police car, his eyes locked on me with a mixture of hatred and defeat. For the first time since my father died, I felt a strange peace settle in my chest. Justice had been served and I'd made sure it was permanent.